5.
New York alphabet murders. 3 young girls were raped and strangled in the Rochester, New York area. The case received its name from the fact that each of the girls' first and last names started with the same letter. Furthermore, each body was found in a town that had a name starting with the same letter as the victims' names. Investigators have theorized that a series of murders with similar circumstances in California in the late 1970s is connected to these 3 murders. Although hundreds of people were questioned, the killer was never caught. One man considered to be a person of interest. He committed suicide 6 weeks after the last of the murders and was cleared in 2007 by DNA profiling. In the case of Carmen Colon, her uncle was also considered a suspect until his suicide in 1991. Another suspect was Kenneth Bianchi, who at the time was an ice cream vendor in Rochester, New York, vending from sites close to the first 2 murder scenes. He was a Rochester native who later moved to Los Angeles, and with his cousin Angelo Buono Jr., who committed the Hillside Strangler murders between 1977 and 1978. Bianchi was never charged with the alphabet murders, and he has repeatedly tried to have investigators officially clear him of suspicion. However, there is circumstantial evidence that his car was seen at 2 of the murder scenes. Carmen Colon 10 disappeared November 16, 1971. She was found 2 days later in Riga, New York, near Churchville, 12 miles from where she had last been seen. Michelle Minza 11 disappeared November 26, 1973. She was found 2 days later in Maidstone, New York, 15 miles from Rochester. Wanda Walkowitz 11 disappeared April 2nd, 1973. She was found the next day at a rest area off State Route 104 in Webster, New York, 7 miles from Rochester.
4.
The Walker family murders is an unsolved murder of 2 parents and 2 children, which took place on the 19th of December 1959 in Osprey, Florida. Authorities believe that 24-year-old Christine Walker arrived at the family's farm home around 4 p.m. on Saturday, December the 19th, 1959, and was raped and murdered by gunshot. Her husband Cliff, 25, then arrived and was murdered by gunshot. Their 3-year-old son Jimmy and 1-year-old daughter Debbie was also murdered. Jimmy was shot and Debbie was shot in addition to being reportedly drowned in the bathtub. The actual cause of death is unknown, and she could have been shot in the bathtub. News stories noted there were gifts around the Christmas tree. Physical evidence left at the scene included a bloody cowboy boot, a cellophane strip from a cool cigarette wrapper, and a fingerprint on the bathtub faucet handle. A serial killer named Emmett Monroe Spencer subsequently confessed to the murders, but the confession was discredited by Sarasota County Sheriff Ross Boyer, who labelled Spencer as a pathological liar. Spencer's confession was determined to be cleverly constructed from real murders written up in newspapers and true crime novels that he liked to read. In 1994, a female bartender in Stroudsburg claimed that one of her customers had boasted of killing the Walker family. This tip was never verified. Police never identified a motive, and 587 people were suspects at one time or another. The case remains open.
3.
The Atlanta Ripper was an unidentified serial killer who was suspected of killing at least 15 Atlanta women in 1911. On May 28, 1911, the body of Belle Walker, an African-American cook, was found 25 yards from her home on Garibaldi Street in Atlanta. Her throat had been cut by an unknown slayer, and the crime was reported in the Atlanta Constitution under the headline, "Negro Woman Killed, No Clue to Slayer." On June the 15th, another black woman, A.D. Watts, was found with her throat slashed, followed on June the 27th by Lizzie Watkins. The search for the serial killer, the Atlanta Ripper, by the press found 6 different suspects, but no convictions were ever made, nor was the crime ever solved. By the end of 1911, 15 women, all black or dark-skinned, all in their early 20s, had been murdered in the same manner. The Ripper may have had as many as 21 victims, but there is no conclusive proof that the murders were carried out by one person.
2.
The Cabin 28 Keddy murders contains a lack of known motive and full of loose ends, conspiracy and questions. On the night of April 11th or 12th, 1981, Glenna Sue Sharp and her kids Tina, John and John's friend Dana Wingate were brutally murdered inside Cabin 28 in Keddy, California, surrounded by drug traffickers and sexual predators. Dozens peripherally involved in the case had motive, if not opportunity. Law enforcement immediately zeroed in on prime suspects, yet this hot case was intentionally made to quickly grow cold.
1.
The Wanda Beach murders, sometimes referred to simply as Wanda, refers to the case of the unsolved murders of Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock at Wanda Beach near Sydney on 11th of January 1965. Their partially buried bodies were discovered the next day. The victims, both aged 15, were best friends and neighbours. The brutal nature of the slayings and the fact that the twin killings occurred on a deserted, wind-swept beach brought publicity to the case. It remains one of the most infamous unsolved Australian murder cases of the 1960s.